Let's talk about the 3 things that wound a narcissist more deeply than anything else on earth. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to dig into a question that comes up constantly in the comments and in messages I get. Can a narcissist actually cry? Do they genuinely feel pain the way the rest of us do? The honest answer is yes, they absolutely do. It might surprise you, especially since narcissists are so skilled at playing the victim and acting as though the world has wronged them at every turn. But here's the twist. That very same emotional sensitivity that makes them so convincing when they're performing hurt is the same sensitivity that leaves them exposed to real wounds. A narcissist's sense of self is built on a foundation that's far more fragile than it looks from the outside, and almost anything can crack it. Some things only rattle them a little, a minor irritation they can shrug off, but every now and then, something strikes at the very center of the identity they've spent years constructing, and the impact is far more profound than most people realize. To understand why, you have to separate the image from the person. The image is the polished, confident, untouchable version they present to the world. It is the character they perform every day. The person underneath is often driven by an intense need to avoid shame, inadequacy, rejection, or emotional vulnerability. That polished exterior isn't simply confidence. It functions as psychological armor. Every compliment reinforces it. Every sign of admiration strengthens it. Every victory adds another layer. But armor can only do so much. If enough pressure is applied in the right place, even the strongest-looking shell begins to fracture. This is why narcissistic behavior can seem so contradictory. Someone who appears fearless in one moment can become explosively defensive the next over something that seems almost insignificant. A simple disagreement, a polite correction, someone choosing another person's opinion over theirs. To an outside observer, these situations hardly seem important. But inside the narcissistic mind, they can feel like evidence that the carefully constructed identity is beginning to lose its grip. Psychologists often refer to this as a narcissistic injury. It isn't merely hurt feelings. It is an injury to the image they depend on to feel secure. When that image is threatened, their emotional response is rarely proportional to what actually happened. The reaction is driven by what the event represents, not by the event itself. Imagine spending years building a magnificent palace, but discovering it rests on thin ice. Every day you decorate the walls, polish the floors, and invite people to admire its beauty. Yet underneath, you constantly worry that one crack in the ice could bring everything down. That's what many narcissistic defenses are trying to prevent. The grandiosity isn't always about believing they're superior, it's often about preventing themselves from feeling painfully ordinary, deeply flawed, or fundamentally unworthy. That is why admiration becomes more than something pleasant. It becomes psychological fuel. Validation reassures them that the palace is still standing. Attention confirms that the image remains convincing. Praise temporarily quiets the fears buried underneath. Without that reassurance, uncertainty begins creeping in, and uncertainty is something they often experience as deeply threatening. But here's what many people misunderstand. The things that wound a narcissist most deeply are not always loud confrontations or dramatic breakups. Sometimes the deepest injuries arrive quietly. Someone calmly refusing to argue. Someone setting a boundary without guilt. Someone moving on without seeking revenge. Someone no longer needing their approval. These moments communicate something the narcissistic ego struggles to tolerate. You no longer control how I see myself. Control over perception is central to maintaining their identity. If they can influence how others think, admire, or depend on them, the image remains intact. When that influence fades, they may experience an unsettling loss of certainty about who they are. It's as though the mirror they've relied on suddenly stops reflecting the version of themselves they want to see. This helps explain why criticism, even when constructive, can provoke reactions that seem wildly disproportionate. Instead of hearing, "You made a mistake," they may unconsciously hear, "You are fundamentally inadequate." Instead of hearing, "I disagree with your decision," they may interpret it as, "You're losing your status and importance." The emotional meaning becomes magnified because it collides with hidden fears they've spent years trying to outrun. Of course, not every person with narcissistic traits responds the same way. Personality exists on a spectrum, and clinically diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder is different from simply displaying narcissistic behaviors. Individual histories, emotional maturity, and willingness to reflect all shape how someone responds. Still, the common thread remains the same. When a person's self-worth depends heavily on external validation and an idealized self-image, Anything that threatens that image can feel far more devastating than it appears from the outside. That is why the strongest reactions often emerge not from genuine confidence, but from the fear that confidence might disappear. The louder the defense, the more it sometimes reveals about what lies beneath. And the more desperately someone protects an image of perfection, the more vulnerable that image often becomes to the smallest crack. But other things go much deeper, striking at the very core of how they see themselves. And if that blow happens to come from someone they actually respect or admire, the damage can be devastating, sometimes irreversible in the moment. Nothing cuts a narcissist quite as sharply as a direct challenge to their pride or to their need to be in control of every situation and every person around them. It doesn't matter whether that challenge happens quietly in private or loudly in front of an audience. Either way, it stings just as much, maybe more. Here's the simplest way to put it. Narcissists are, in a sense, architects of their own suffering. They build it themselves brick by brick through constant lying, through pretending to be someone they're not, and through a deep well of insecurity they refuse to acknowledge even to themselves. Normally, none of that would concern anyone else. People are allowed their flaws. Except narcissists carry this unshakable belief that they are somehow above criticism, untouchable beyond reproach. So the second they feel challenged or exposed, something shifts in them, and they start looking for a way to make someone else pay for that discomfort. In their mind, other people should always absorb the weight of pain, and they themselves should never have to. I've also noticed that over the last several years, narcissism has increasingly entered the conversation as a legitimate mental health topic, not just an internet buzzword. And honestly, what narcissists often need most from the people in their orbit is patience and compassion, even when that's the hardest thing to offer them. Right now, chances are the narcissist in your life is behaving in a fairly hypocritical way, saying one thing while doing the complete opposite, and quietly banking on your goodwill to earn themselves another chance. That contradiction, that gap between what they say and what they do, is precisely what leaves them vulnerable to being hurt in the first place. So without dragging this out any further, here are 3 surefire ways people end up wounding a narcissist's feelings, whether they mean to or not. The first way is simple: leaving them out, pushing them aside, making them feel invisible. Narcissists cannot tolerate being told the plain truth about their shortcomings. Even the smallest, gentlest bit of criticism lands like a deep cut, because underneath all that bravado, their sense of self is paper thin. They live in constant fear of being alone, because their entire identity runs on a steady diet of praise, validation, and attention from everyone around them. Strip that away, and a narcissist genuinely struggles to function. They need other people feeding their ego just to feel like themselves. And here's the part that makes all of this so tricky. Once you've been pulled into a narcissist's orbit, breaking free of it is far harder than anyone expects. These days, narcissists have it easier than ever thanks to social media and instant messaging. They've essentially built themselves a curated fantasy world online, one where the compliments and validation never stop, and they never even have to show up in person to get it. That means relationships that would collapse for anyone else, relationships built on distance, inconsistency, and almost no real face-to-face contact, can somehow keep limping along for a narcissist. They can survive, even thrive, off nothing more than a steady drip of likes, comments, and empty compliments scrolling across a screen. For now, at least, that shallow stream is enough to keep their fragile fantasy alive. The second thing that terrifies a narcissist, more than almost anything, is the fear of being exposed. I've gone deep into this topic in an earlier video, so I won't repeat everything here. But it's worth restating that narcissists are obsessed with image, with how they're perceived by the outside world. They'll tell lie after lie, weaving an increasingly elaborate web, just to protect that carefully curated version of themselves. Their entire existence can start to feel like a performance, a non-stop effort to convince everyone around them that they're more successful, more fascinating, more impressive than they could ever actually be. So when that performance starts to crack, when people begin to see through it right there in front of others, the pain that follows must be almost unbearable for them. Watching that entire fabricated persona crumble in real time is genuinely one of the most painful experiences a narcissist can go through, because their whole sense of worth is tied up in maintaining that illusion. The third and final thing that truly gets under a narcissist's skin is being insulted, especially with honesty. And here's the irony. Narcissists are extremely aware of how their own words land on other people. They know exactly what they're doing when they use manipulation, dishonesty, and cutting remarks to hurt someone else. But flip that dynamic around, and suddenly a narcissist cannot handle even fair, calm, honest criticism directed at them. Being genuinely truthful with a narcissist can feel, in their eyes, almost like committing a crime. This happens more often than you'd think. Any critique of the image they've spent so long constructing gets instantly interpreted as a personal attack, even if it was never meant that way. Over time, you'll notice narcissists are unusually sensitive to insults, and that sensitivity comes from a place of deep, hidden insecurity and anxiety they rarely let anyone see. Unfortunately, there's almost always some flaw lurking just beneath the polished surface, and that's simply the uncomfortable truth of who they are. Things tend to unravel quickly for them once their authentic self starts showing through the cracks. Many struggle to even grasp basic truths about their own behavior and its impact on others, which makes real growth or change incredibly rare. So, to sum it up, those are the 3 things most likely to genuinely affect a narcissist in a lasting negative way. Once you take a step back and really look at it, their weaknesses become almost obvious. They're calculated. They manipulate the people closest to them. And underneath every layer of confidence and control, they're actually scared and deeply insecure. That's really everything I wanted to cover today, so I'll wrap this section up here. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you for spending some of your time with me. Now let's shift gears and talk about the single most effective way to truly get under a narcissist's skin, to really get back at them in a way that actually works. Nothing triggers jealousy and envy in a narcissist quite like watching you build a genuinely happy, independent life without them in it. Honestly, that's the worst possible outcome for them, because it fills them with a resentment they can't quite name. Narcissists are fundamentally incapable of finding real happiness on their own. Even the ones who look successful from the outside, who've built impressive careers or accumulated wealth, never feel truly satisfied because nothing is ever enough to fill that bottomless need for attention and admiration. There's something almost strange about the satisfaction narcissists get from watching others suffer. Seeing someone else in pain, someone else feeling broken, gives them a fleeting sense of relief from their own inner emptiness, even if it only lasts a moment. Keep in mind that narcissists, almost as a matter of habit, try to make life harder for everyone around them. That old saying, misery loves company, could have been written specifically about them. But here's what matters most. Your own mental and emotional well-being is worth infinitely more than anything a narcissist thinks, says, or does. Narcissists have an almost uncanny ability to sense when you're hurting. They can also tell when you're still holding on to resentment, or when part of you is still open to forgiving them, because that emotional opening is exactly what makes you an easy target to pull back in. That's why keeping your distance matters so much. Distance from the narcissist themselves and distance from the people who enable or defend them, sometimes referred to as flying monkeys. Those people will do everything in their power to keep you feeling small, stuck, and unsure of yourself. If you're serious about protecting your peace from a narcissist, the healthiest move you can make is to stop engaging entirely, both with them and with anyone who backs them up. Even a small amount of continued contact can quietly slow down your healing process. Of course, how long that healing actually takes depends heavily on how much damage was done in the first place, and that's different for everyone. If you do find yourself forced into contact with a narcissist despite your best efforts to avoid it, staying emotionally grounded becomes absolutely essential. One approach that tends to work well is treating them almost like they're invisible. Walking past, not reacting, not engaging with whatever bait they're offering. The single most powerful thing you can do in that moment is stay quiet and protect your own inner peace, because narcissists genuinely cannot comprehend a person who simply refuses to play their game. Narcissists will often go looking for old victims specifically to reopen old wounds and rehash old arguments. They assume, or at least hope, that life without them has been difficult for you, and they want to witness that struggle firsthand because it feeds their sense of power and control. Once a narcissist realizes that you're genuinely no longer interested in their push and pull games, something shifts. They lose the control they thought they had over you. They actually take a strange kind of enjoyment in watching you spiral into anger, resentment, or a desire for revenge, because all of that keeps you emotionally tethered to them. And staying trapped in those feelings of helplessness only prolongs how long you remain stuck in the situation. At the same time, it's worth remembering that carrying a negative outlook on life tends to attract more negativity into it. If you genuinely want to transform your life after surviving narcissistic abuse, You have to be willing to shift how you think, how you feel, and who you become as you continue to grow. Try to stay courageous at every stage of that journey, even when it feels slow or uncertain. Interestingly, when narcissists see someone they once hurt thriving and doing well, it can stir up real sadness or jealousy inside them. Even if they put on a happy face for appearances, deep down, they may still resent you for the damage their own actions caused to the relationship in the first place. If you manage to keep your inner light burning despite everything you went through, it tends to frustrate them even more and can even push them toward hostility. It becomes genuinely difficult for them to accept that you've moved on and built something better for yourself without their involvement. Choosing to act as though a narcissist simply doesn't matter to you anymore is one of the fastest, most effective ways to unsettle them. It's likely to cause them real emotional distress, even if they never let that show on the surface. Around this stage, you might notice the narcissist starting to circle back, testing the waters cautiously, looking for any small opening to slip back into your life. Reconnecting with a narcissist, even briefly, carries real risk. So unless they offer a genuine, heartfelt apology and actually take responsibility for how they treated you, it's wise to keep that door firmly shut and ignore whatever attempts they make to reopen it. Sometimes they'll try a grand romantic gesture or an unexpectedly sweet moment, hoping to win you back and make you second-guess your decision to walk away, only to slide right back into the same harmful patterns the moment your guard drops again. If you know that a former narcissist in your life is quietly watching your progress from a distance, the safest choice is to keep as much distance as possible. Your worth was never dependent on whether they ever choose to recognize it. Your growth and success naturally become a source of jealousy for them because it holds up a mirror to their own shortcomings and confirms that they'll never truly match your depth, your character, or your emotional maturity. Thriving in spite of everything you endured during narcissistic abuse is, in many ways, the greatest form of payback there is. So protect your sense of inner calm, protect that inner light, and don't let anyone, especially them, dim it. I really hope everything shared today helps you in some meaningful way. Wishing you a peaceful, good week ahead, and I'll see you in the next video. Now let's move into something a little different. 9 signs that suggest a narcissist secretly still has feelings for you or wants back into your life. One key behavior worth understanding here is something psychologists call hoovering. This is a specific form of emotional manipulation that narcissists rely on the moment they sense their grip on you is slipping. The term itself comes from the image of a vacuum sucking something back in quickly and with force. It's simply another tactic designed to pull you back into the same cycle of abuse, so they can keep using you to meet their own emotional needs. From their deeply self-centered point of view, the narrative always plays out the same way. They'll insist that you were the one who ended things, conveniently leaving out the part where their own interest and effort disappeared once the initial honeymoon phase wore off. It's an incredibly common pattern, a strong, charming first impression that slowly curdles into something far less pleasant over time. So how do you actually spot the signs that a narcissist is quietly draining your energy and pulling you back in? Stick around because I'm going to walk through 9 clear signals that reveal when a narcissist is trying to exploit you all over again. The first sign is that they act as though absolutely nothing has changed between you. A narcissist attempting to win back a former partner or friend will often reach out completely out of nowhere, with no real warning. Pay close attention to any message that feels a little too sweet, a little too nostalgic, or simply too kind to feel genuine. That's usually worth a second, more skeptical look. Rather than spending energy trying to decode exactly what they want, it's often more useful to just observe the pattern itself. They'll talk to you as though everything between you is completely normal, gently nudging you to just move past whatever happened, as if it were a minor misunderstanding rather than real harm. This might show up as a lighthearted text, a casual phone call just to check in, or something that feels harmless on the surface. Former partners of narcissists have described being approached out of nowhere, sometimes at work, with comments like missing the small daily rituals you used to share together. Another classic move is an unexpected gift showing up with no explanation, like a bouquet of flowers appearing out of the blue. Narcissists almost never take genuine responsibility for their actions, and they rarely make any real effort to repair what they broke. And honestly, that's one of the defining traits of the pattern itself. Instead, they simply act as though nothing bad ever happened at all. Much of this performance exists purely to protect their public image, especially for whoever might be watching on social media. At the same time, They're quietly trying to convince you that the relationship never really ended in the first place. The second sign is that narcissists have mastered the art of apologizing without meaning a single word of it. It's important to remember that narcissists rarely undergo any lasting, meaningful change. So before you even consider forgiving them or giving them another chance, take a moment to really sit with whether their apology feels genuine or rehearsed. There's often a subtle undercurrent of dishonesty woven through this kind of hoovering, quiet but remarkably effective if you're not paying close attention. If you want to test how sincere they actually are, try gently pushing back on something they say or steering the conversation in a different direction. If they respond with anger or defensiveness, that's usually a strong indicator their apology was never rooted in real accountability to begin with. Narcissists are deeply self-focused individuals who consistently place their own wants above everyone else's needs, and they'll keep leaning on these same tactics for as long as those tactics continue to work on you. Be cautious of anyone who fakes remorse, because there's almost always something they hope to gain from it. That insincere apology is just one more tool in their manipulation toolkit. A genuine, honest apology, on the other hand, is usually followed by real, visible change in someone's future behavior. So try not to overanalyze every choice you make right now. You're allowed to trust your own judgment and make your own decisions. The third sign is grand promises of eternal love and total devotion. Love bombing remains one of a narcissist's favorite weapons, and for good reason, it works. They'll pour out intense declarations of affection, sharing feelings in a way that feels overwhelming and immediate. For a narcissist, dredging up old memories becomes a key strategy in winning you back. They tend to exaggerate how meaningful those memories actually were, inflating them through their own distorted self-image until the moment feels far bigger and more significant than it really was. They might say things like, insisting they could never find anyone better than you, or that no one else makes them feel the way you did. These big, dramatic, emotional gestures can feel disarming, even comforting in the moment. But every single time they express this so-called love, what they're really after is getting you to give in and come back to them. Even after everything that's happened, these hollow declarations of love just keep coming, wave after wave. If you're in any kind of relationship with a narcissist, understand that they will use the word love as a strategic tool, purely to keep you from walking away for good. The fourth sign involves narcissists making sweeping promises they have absolutely no intention of keeping. This ties directly back into their love bombing strategy. They'll try to reassure you with big, dramatic statements. Talk of marriage, offers to buy you something extravagant, plans for some big trip together. The uncomfortable truth is there's almost no real chance any of it will actually happen. Narcissists are fundamentally looking out for themselves above all else, which is exactly why their word so often turns out to be worthless. None of this is your fault, and you shouldn't carry any blame for how you felt or reacted throughout any of it. Those promises were never really about you to begin with. Keep that firmly in mind whenever old doubts creep back in. Ultimately, everything a narcissist does is aimed at deepening your dependence on them for as long as they can possibly stretch it out. The fifth sign appears when a narcissist can't reach you directly, so instead they start working through other people. A narcissist will go to surprising lengths to try to pull you back into their orbit. One common approach involves staying unusually close to your family, checking in regularly with your parents, and telling them how much they supposedly appreciate and miss you. They may also use your children as a way to brag to others about how wonderful you are or how much they claim to be missing you. Watch closely for this particular hoovering tactic, where they attempt to get closer to your personal life by reaching out through people you already trust and rely on. They might even send affectionate messages through these go-betweens, hoping the message reaches you indirectly. This typically starts happening once you've stopped responding to them directly yourself. The sixth sign is when a narcissist tries to win your sympathy by playing the victim. People who lean toward narcissistic traits often have a real flair for the dramatic. They can spend an enormous amount of time feeling sorry for themselves, and they're remarkably skilled at inventing fake emergencies or manufactured crises, all just to pull your attention back toward them. It's not unusual for them to exaggerate a difficult situation, or even fabricate something as serious as a family tragedy, purely to gain your sympathy and concern. Their intense emotional displays usually stem from a constant, almost insatiable need for attention and admiration. And it's not only about you specifically, they also crave being the center of attention in a broader sense in nearly every room they walk into. Most of the time, this kind of tactic is simply a way to capture your focus by dialing up how alarmed or worried you feel about their supposed situation. And that brings us to the seventh sign, which involves narcissists being particularly skilled at spreading misinformation and stirring up rumors, a talent that often gets used strategically to reshape how others see a situation and eventually to pull you back toward them under a version of events that paints them in a far kinder light than they deserve.